So hi, this is Paul Glatter with Religion Unplugged, and we're recording a podcast and a YouTube video today with John W. Miller in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Just to introduce briefly, John is a journalist. In fact, we were colleagues at the Wall Street Journal for many years, and John will tell us about his journey and as we talk here about a new documentary he's produced with another filmmaker in Pittsburgh called Moundsville. So, John, tell us about this. Tell us about this town in West Virginia and how you got so fascinated with it.
So you and I both covered the metals industry and the steel industry out of Pittsburgh, which required a lot of car trips up and down the Ohio Valley and this sort of the old heart of American industry and manufacturing. And so I discovered Moundsville on one of those reporting trips, and really the mound drew me in. I mean, it's this 2,000-year-old Native American burial mound, and I knew a little bit about the Native American stories from after Columbus, but didn't know much about the deep history. So this idea of deep history in the region fascinated me. And so I started visiting the town a little bit to learn the history. And I met a guy named Steve Hummel who he advertised as a paranormal hot dog stand and wrote a front page feature in the Wall Street Journal about it. And, all in this area are thousands of towns like this that clearly, had more prosperous days and were trying to transition to something else. And, what that something else is not always clear. And then the 2016 election happened, and everybody was talking about these small towns, which, mathematically voted for Donald Trump. And the idea of telling the story, a deeper American story through this one town kind of gradually grew in me. And I thought about moving there and doing a book, and then eventually met Dave Bernabo, who's my filmmaking partner. I'd never made a film before. And we teamed up and made this film, Moundsville, which is the story of the town, but also the story of America, because it talks about the deep past, thousands of years ago, Native American presence, the burial mounds, white settlement, rise of industry, fall of industry, and now an economy that's very much a service economy with some resources, gas and coal. And then Americans just trying to puzzle out what the future looks like.
Yeah, and I was telling you that I went back and read that first journal piece, and then there was another magazine piece in America magazine, and then before I rewatched your film, and I really encourage listeners and viewers to check out this film. It's on PBS now. John can tell us where to find it, but you'll find a lot of really fascinating characters like this Steve Hummel you mentioned, who's got this paranormal museum. But so tell us where can they find the film now? We'll return to that a few times so people can know where they can see this.
The film's easily available on PBS, so on pbs.org, just by searching for it, just like you would search for a Ken Burns documentary, or on the PBS app, which is on Roku or any other streaming device that you use. So it's very easy to find right now, and it's free for a year on PBS.
That's awesome. So, all right, so you might see it aired in West Virginia or 338 various PBS stations, or you can go to the app like John just talked about. Or can they buy it on your website if they want to buy it there as well on Moundsville.org?
Yes.
Yeah.
Moundsville.org has an option to buy it, and also has a bunch of content related to the film. It'll be screened by different PBS stations over the next 3 years, but besides next Monday at 9 p.m. in West Virginia, I can't predict when they're going to screen it.
Right. Okay. Well, PBS films are fantastic, and this is a great addition. And when I first saw a part of it and was talking with you about it, I was curious, was there a religion angle? Hence, why we should talk about it on Religion Unplugged. And as I reread the pieces and watched the film, I realized there's a lot in there actually, and it's not one religion. There's many different elements. Do you want to explain some of? I'm curious, before I explain what I saw, I want to hear what you saw as you were making and writing this material.
Well, from my heart, really, after the election and after, this seeing the troubles that journalism was having, I was motivated to do something that was more meaningful. And by meaningful, I do mean loving in a Christian sense, in terms of building bridges and reaching out to people. and just listening, because so much of the journalism about places like this is pretty judgmental, and cliched. And the idea of doing a piece where we listened to people and they told the story, and we just sat there and we're humble about it. That did come from my heart in a kind of, I think, loving way, or there was like a divine spark there. Now, there's also the sense of transcendence I think you get from the mound that is 2,000 years old, and it sort of is like this Greek chorus that intimates that our civilization will evolve and we will pass, and the most things in life are not permanent. And so I think that is a jolt that is spiritual in nature. I'm curious to hear what you took away from it.
Yeah, I definitely thought that, starting with the mound, that was like a spiritual element, and that first story about even the paranormal and people thinking of these spirits and the ghosts in this penitentiary, and the violence.
Totally. Yeah. Can I say something about that? The Trump campaign was the Make America Great Again. Whatever you think about it, was based on nostalgia and like this idea of bringing back the 50s in a way. And that's kind of an appeal to ghosts. And so here you have a town that literally markets ghosts. Like Steve has a ghost store basically where you can go and like sort of be with ghosts. And so I thought that was a very powerful indication of like where the country is in some ways, that we want to go back to something, and that we want to spend time with the ghosts of the past.
Yeah, and then I think that was clear, and then I think we see sprinkled throughout. There's two other thoughts that I had watching it again. Was I saw faith sprinkled throughout. It might have been a flash of a cross on someone's rearview mirror, an intentional shot by you and David, the other filmmaker, or cross on Steve's neck, or a picture of Jesus over Phil Remke's office. Some of these different things. In the magazine piece, you went in depth a little more with, I think it was a priest, and also with that Vice Mayor Remke.
Right. So
their beliefs a bit, right?
Yeah. So towns like this in Appalachia are going through a kind of sociological religious change, in that people have been leaving the Roman Catholic Church, partly because of the sexual abuse crisis, but also, in West Virginia, there's been a corruption crisis too in the church, but also because they see it as too stodgy, and evangelical churches are seen as more exciting. So Phil now, for example, the vice mayor, worships both at the Catholic Church and an evangelical church in Wheeling. And the Catholic community is sort of older and a little bit in decline there. They have a fantastic priest who I profiled in the American Magazine piece, who's a Vietnamese guy who saw it as his ministry to like minister to people in coal country. So he was in an even poorer community before in the southern part of West Virginia. I should mention too that one of the main characters, Rose Hart, is this lovely woman who started this charity to help people in poorer parts of West Virginia. So here you have somebody in a pretty poor town who is helping people in an even poorer town, and she just radiates goodness and generosity, and sort of this pragmatic, help your neighbor toughness that people in the state love to identify with.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right though, and Religion Unplugged, one of our thesis, and kind of part of our mission is this notion that, religion, the way we cover it, the way we look at religion, is often in the mainstream media, where you and I've spent time, is often kind of seen in terms of conflict or set narratives, and whereas religion is actually very different. It's it's a different part of it's personal for people, but it's lived. It's not just institutionalized. And I think in this film you were able to show a bit how it was lived by people like Rose.
Well, it's about love, and I think journalism is a loving profession in a lot of ways when it listens to people and when it cares about people. So, like, in the case of the Boston Globe investigating the abuse crisis in the church, God was on the side of the journalists, clearly, and clearly when journalism does things like expose corruption that's hurting people or theft, that is loving, and that's where religion and journalism align, because they care about the truth of people's lives, and they care about people's lived experiences. So I find a lot of synchronicity in journalism and faith there.
Yeah, and on that point too, I'm curious to ask a couple questions around like your own journey and in this process. You're obviously writing for this Jesuit magazine, America, great people. You've introduced me to some wonderful people there. But what's your sort of journey around the faith side of things as you're also telling the story of this place and these people?
So I left the Wall Street Journal in late 2016 after 13 years, partly because of a professional crisis that I wanted to do something more different, sort of deeper, and this movie is kind of that, but also a personal crisis where I thought maybe God was leading me in a different way, and I did consider religious life, so monastic life or an order like the Jesuits, and now have sort of not following that path for now, but I'm trying to integrate everything that's happened in the last few years. So I spent a little bit of time in a monastery in Belgium, and have been working for this Jesuit magazine, and now trying to put all the pieces together and be integrated so that like the experiences I had at the monastery mean something. And just because I don't become a monk doesn't mean that I can't incorporate monastic sort of ideas and habits into my life as a writer and filmmaker.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And another, I guess, related string there, and what you were talking about to me, as I listening, is differences in storytelling. You're kind of highlighting. It's like I see you did this film. You did the A head at the Wall Street Journal, which is the front page kind of quirky story, the magazine piece, a film, and a blog. And so, how is it different than how you and I learned to tell stories in journalism? And yeah, like the process, I guess, and the approach.
Well, the big thing for me that I learned at the Wall Street Journal was to make sure that the story was original, that you were pointing out or bringing to light a person or a place or an idea that nobody has seen before, and you can't Google. And so that's what drives me. And the details tell the story. Show, don't tell for your journalism students. And
Yeah.
getting people who you like on the page and who you want to root for, but also seeing the bigger picture and connecting I guess with journalism, the way I would define it would be a particular story that informs your knowledge of a bigger picture. So what can Paul Glatter teach us about journalism teachers in the world? That's a bad example. But like what's the bigger picture we can learn from like a town like Moundsville? What does it say about American manufacturing, about employment in America, about the service industry, about whether we need a universal basic income scheme, about American history, about the gas industry? What are the bigger things we can learn from a particular story? That's what journalism is.
Yeah. Well, to me, that's what was interesting is how you sort of I see how you sort of flip the process in a way, because I think typically in journalism, and it makes sense. And by the way, like, I think you and I still read tons of great journalism at the Journal and the Times and a lot of places, New York, are just doing really great work. But often for those, and for obvious reasons, the writer we have to sell the editor on a story, and we got to narrow the focus. And we somehow we train the focus on a thesis, and we go to that place, trying to get the examples and the things that we know are going to make the story work as we pitched it, right? And we got to connect the dots, like you're saying, to bigger context. But here, it seems like you were able to, because of the luxury of time, and you controlled some of the formats for how you're telling the story on the blog and the documentary. You could almost inverse it and focus it on the town itself and connect the dots in a different way, maybe more broadly or something, right?
What I love about the documentary, and this kind of happened a little bit by accident and hard work both, is that we have people who are not scholars saying scholarly things. Like when Bill Winnick, who's a retired teacher, he's in the diner and he says, capitalism means you want things made for cheaper, and if you can do that, you move somewhere else. And he just captures like capitalism can make this town rich or prosperous for 40 years, but when the factory closes, then they lose that. And it really just informs, it gives you this deeper, to me at least, like this the notion of like this epiphany of like, oh yeah, like, it's not a good or a bad thing, capitalism, but it has this character that it can make you really prosperous and supply for or provide for your town for decades. And then when people stop buying whatever the factory is making, then or somebody can make it cheaper somewhere else, then you lose the factory. And he's saying it. It's not like a talking head academic saying it. And so that the idea that people can be wise who aren't like experts. I think also that might be like a Christian message that people have wisdom, and if you listen to them, they can share that wisdom.
Yeah, intelligence, wisdom. There are a lot of charming characters. I like the that guy in the diner, the poet laureate. He speaks is very eloquent, but also just even the clerk in a bank. I mean, these different people have meaningful things to say. It seems as you
And the blog, by the way, has become an entire side project. I've done dozens of stories that are all on Moundsville.org. People can read, including on Lady Gaga, whose mom is from Moundsville, George Brett, the great baseball player who was born there, this glass maker whose dad was laid off from Fostoria, so he started making glass in his backyard. Now he has his own glass business. So dozens of people who are tangential to the movie are profiled, and I've explored history and done stories on essays on Native American mounds and whether factories can save small towns. All kinds of stuff is all on Moundsville.org.
Yeah, so I was looking through some of those stories today, and tell us about what's going on with COVID in Moundsville right now. I saw you had a few pieces on that.
Yeah, well, like a lot of places like that, it has an aging population, so it's vulnerable. It has some hospitals nearby in the area. But again, it has and what they call the comorbidities, I think, like the things that make you vulnerable to COVID if you're older. And I haven't heard, last time I checked, that there was a kind of nasty outbreak. They locked down fairly efficiently. Okay. And so far so good. But I do worry about those people because they became friends and we worked together for over a year, and then we sort of have stayed in touch. So I care about them. And a lot of places like that, I have feared this spring, thinking of all the towns in Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia, full of people over 50 and 60, and not always in the best health. Obesity rates, diabetes are kind of high. So I've been worried about them. But we still don't know how badly they'll be impacted by COVID.
So you're in a way, like, you seem to have kind of adopted Moundsville, or they adopted you or something. But do you plan to, do you know how long you're going to keep reporting stuff about Moundsville? Do you think you'll move there one day? Or do you think you'll move on to another town to do a story or a film, or what are your thoughts on
I'm sensitive to that because I'm their guest, and so I try, I don't use words like I've adopted them. We premiered the film in the town, which was incredible. We had 150 people came out, and we were terrified that people wouldn't like it. And so it was a big relief when they thought it was balanced. And a couple of people were kind of cranky about it, but for the most part, they like it. And, I've been in the phase of following my heart the last few years, without a full-time job. So I've been doing tons of projects, and I will keep doing this one as long as it feels as it feels right. I don't think I'll move there. But I am fascinated, and it'll be part of my life, as long as I live, because it was my best attempt at a meaningful response to the Trump moment and division in America, and a deeper look at where this country's headed. And so it'll always be that for me. And the fact that it's now on PBS kind of validates that vision, which, was turned into a movie with a budget of $4,000 and a crew of 2. And so really it's the power of an idea that I think speaks to people, that listening and telling deeper stories about the context we're in, because Americans don't always think about the past very much. And so to reflect a little more deeply on the past, Moundsville will always be my window for doing that, I think.
Yeah, I saw one post. Someone was comparing your film to Hillbilly Elegy, which is a best-selling book by J.D. Vance, who grew up in Ohio and I think parts of that, basically the Appalachian region. There we go. Yeah, I read it. I think it was a really excellent book in many ways. But I think the comment I saw was that your film tells a richer. Someone was saying your film tells a richer, more meaningful story than his book.
I think, it's broader, I think, because the truth is that most people can't, get out and go be hedge fund managers in Boston. I mean, a lot of people want to stay in these towns. And the reality in these towns is that it's not hell. Like, everybody's not on opioids. Like, there are plenty of jobs. Like, in the movie, we have a guy who has a kitchen cabinet company that he makes kitchen cabinets. And he employs 14 people. And so there's some manufacturing, but it's with German-made robots, and they don't employ 500 people. So it's different. That's the thing. Like, that's the thing that people don't get from the big cities, I think, is that life is okay for a lot of Americans. It's just different than it was, and it is poorer. And so most people are not like, on the extremes, like in the gutter or fabulously wealthy. They're just trying to get by and live normal lives. And that deserves respect and love. And a consideration that's of normalcy, that we don't otherize people. That's a Christian thing too, like not to otherize people, that they're our neighbors and deserve our love.
Yeah. It's interesting. If I just read that first story you did in the journal about, mostly focused on Steve Hummel and this paranormal hot dog stand, my impression of Moundsville would be kind of like there's kind of a hipster town. There's like this fun, offbeat character there, and if someone was driving through Moundsville, you'd get a different impression. If you didn't stop, you might just think, well, this is a forlorn industrial town. But it's interesting when you stopped, you went back many times, you talked to people, and I think you gave us an impression, maybe curated to some. Do you think we heard from some of the most interesting, wise, intelligent locals who gave us that history, who gave us maybe some rational, reality as well as optimism? Did we get a false picture or a pretty real picture?
I think it's an accurate picture. I think they are the most interesting people we found. I mean, some people are not. We probably interviewed 40 people, and 20 made the cut. I think Moundsville suffers a little bit from not having a university. That's a big difference maker in towns in Appalachia. If you have a school nearby, you have younger people, and you have coffee shops, and you have little restaurants and stuff. Moundsville doesn't have that, so it's probably a little less exciting than we portray in the film. But that's okay. It's a movie. It's supposed to be entertaining. And its long-term prospects are, I think population decline is inevitable, and it's tourism and some resources. It's the gas industry, and it's tourism. And that's accurately shown in the movie, the transition to this different economy. I think that comes across fairly accurately. Yeah, I think we did a good job of showing you what the truth is about Moundsville.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and sort of the hope that I think you don't hit us over the head with where the optimism or hope is, but you seem to point to innovation, hope for innovation. Yeah. You didn't really talk about explicitly like people's hope in religion or politics. It's more alluded to, but you said that you told us on this conversation that it was your response in a way to the Trump election. But are these people seeing? I think you told me before that you estimate 60% of people in this town or region voted for Trump, hoping perhaps that nationalism, economic nationalism would help them. Has it from your estimation, has it brought any dividends to Moundsville?
So the actual number is 72% for Marshall County, which where Moundsville is. So I can't say exactly what Moundsville is, but the county is 72% for Trump in 2016. And he's still popular in the town. It's a Fox News watching enclave, and people's information sources aren't that diverse. So, no, there's no new factory being built because of trade policy. The sort of more utopian vision of the Trump agenda has not worked out for places like Moundsville, and I reject utopias. Like, you can't have a perfect life. So there is a sense of pride that people have in America that I think will always gravitate a place like that towards a candidate like Trump, who has a nationalist kind of enthusiastic nationalism. I think Moundsville is very patriotic, and so it's hard for them not to embrace Trump, given the flag waving.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Any more updates of where the film goes next, and maybe remind us once again where people can find this?
So Moundsville.org is the movie's website, which has an option to rent and buy it. And that's a longer version, by the way, than the one that's on PBS. That's 75 minutes. PBS is 57 minutes, and that's on pbs.org or on Roku, the PBS app on your phone. You can get it. I've had it on my phone and was very excited yesterday when they put it there to search for it and to see that it was placed up there next to Ken Burns' documentary. So any PBS app. We don't have any screenings planned, but I hope it will be part of the conversation in the election. We talk about, why Trump was elected, because I think Moundsville gives you a sense of that. Like in the first chapter, we explore the industrial past and how everybody had a job. And that is what Americans dream of, to have a society where you don't have to stress about finding a good factory job.
Right. Great. Well, thanks for joining us today, John. And again, I hope everyone checks out this film about Moundsville, West Virginia, titled simply Moundsville. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Paul. Take care.